Elysia Borowy-Reeder from MOCAD Detroit.
Yes.
So, welcome to Bad at Sports.
Thanks.
Where to start? So I feel like we've shared an orbit for a really long time. You were part of the brain trust behind the Milwaukee International and the Dark Fair, and a couple of iterations of that. You were most recently at Cam Rowley, and now are the director of MOCAD in Detroit.
Executive director.
Executive director. I don't want to undersell it. And I think, we were interested in thinking through that space that is Detroit now. That is, what made that an attractive move?
Well, I'm from there. I was born there. All my family's from there. My mom lives there. My husband's family lives there. So going to a bankrupt city with an emergency manager and no resources wasn't quite as intimidating as you would think. Detroit has always been...
Have you considered a career in PR?
Yeah, I've done a lot of PR, actually.
I hope that's not your sales pitch. Detroit, it's not as miserable as you'd expect.
Intimidating, not miserable.
Oh, sorry. I stand corrected.
So it's an interesting place. There is the FBI report recently just came out earlier this week that said Detroit and Pontiac, Michigan are the two most violent cities in the United States. As a manager of a large institution, you do have to take lots and lots of precautions. You don't have city police, so you have to contract with state police. You have to have 24/7 security. You have to have lots of cameras. You have to do a lot of security at all events. So there's a lot of extra work that you have to do if you're going to run something in downtown Detroit. There's no doubt about it.
So you left the safety and security of Carolina. I feel like Detroit operates in a really... And Jose, I know that you're there, and I will introduce you in just a moment, but don't mind me. I'm going to up with this whole Detroit thing. I feel like Detroit gets this sort of New Berlin rep in the art world, where it's like this incredibly great place to move because it's so cheap and so amazing. And then every time I'm there, I'm like, there's no one here. Like, no one would hear me scream. It's like the pitch black.
It's a big city. It's 138 square miles. So Boston, Manhattan, and San Francisco can fit within the city limits. So it is a huge, huge old city. So that part is true.
And one with a rich architectural tradition. It's a beautiful city.
It is. MOCAD was designed by Albert Kahn, and that's just one of the many buildings on Woodward Avenue. It has a deep history, and that part is actually good because you have more opportunity to raise funds. There's deeper foundations there. There's older families that care deeply about the cultural history of Detroit. So in that way, art and culture is a little bit more alive in Detroit. And since I've moved there and taken the position of executive director, the New York Times has visited 4 times. We have lots and lots of press that visit us, mainly from Berlin and Paris. It's a little disconcerting because sometimes they show up in the museum in bulletproof vests, and they're like, okay, we're ready. And I'm like, I can't go anywhere with you wearing that because that is just completely ridiculous.
Where did they get them?
They order them online. You can order them online.
I thought it was a federal offense to own one as a civilian. I'm surprised that you can walk around with a bulletproof vest.
Yeah.
It used to be against the law. Maybe it's if you're a felon. I don't know. I'm a felon, so it's hard to tell.
It's a fascinating city, and I'd say that I've met more artists and more people who are interested in art and culture since I moved there in like 6 months than I did in 2 years in North Carolina.
Well, the Detroit Institute of Art certainly has had a long history and done a lot of interesting work over the years. And we just actually interviewed, was it last week's show? We had ArtX Detroit, which is a residency program there. So, I do think that there is I certainly have heard about a lot of things going on there. I think Detroit's reputation, like, is there any way for Detroit to shake its reputation? Like, even if tomorrow everybody starts skipping down the street, tra-la-la, with cartoon birds flying around their head and the streets are paved with gold, like, people are going to still be like, yeah, Detroit sucks. So, I mean, it's funny, this sort of weird, crushing PR problem it has, regardless of what state it's in.
I think if you're an artist and you can buy a whole building that's like 5,000 square feet that's in pretty good, decent condition for $500 to $1,000, I don't think there's any place in the United States that you can do that, because your practice is your career. You're not having to have 3 jobs in order to support your practice.
That's appealing. That's less than I pay a month in property taxes.
Right.
So Richard brought up the Detroit Institute of Art just up the street from you guys, and I feel like their problems have been incredibly public. And how does it, so you dealing with the kind of contemporary art museum down the street, how much of that sort of awkwardness gets spilled on you? Because for those of you who don't know, the Detroit was looking at the possibility of selling off the collection of the Detroit Institute of Art as a way to help pay their debts.
Well, I'd say it's really disconcerting. I mean, one is just an emotional factor. The DIA is where I went every Saturday morning as a kid, and that's where you learn about the history of the United States. It's where you get excited about working in a museum. I mean, I spent a lot of time there. So, of course, I'm sad to hear that they're going to sell some of their signature works, because in 1953 and 1954, the DIA purchased several signature works like the Van Gogh and the Bruegel with city funds. And so when it was having its heyday, it spent money on some really great art. And now that those works were purchased with 100% of city funds, they're being looked at as a financial asset. Bankruptcy for Detroit, the way that it's done, it was designed for corporations. It was never designed for cities. So it brings up a lot of questions around bankruptcy law, and so some things are being tested right now. On the front of the DIA, it says, "For the people of Detroit, for enjoyment and education." It says it in huge letters. And so for them to look at any kind of collection, which isn't usually, when you look at museum finances, the collection is never a financial asset. It's never on the books. And now all of a sudden it's being looked at as a possibility.
Well, there was a scandal in the Milwaukee Art Museum securing their loans against the collection when they built that Calatrava building. So that was a big, shocking deal. So the notion of having the city tied to a collection and selling off parts of it is quite, there's probably another example, but I can't think of it. So it's a pretty shocking thing.
But how much of a dent will it make in the overall debt?
Well,
if it was sold like
the bankruptcy, so the bankruptcy, when they declared it, was $18.5 billion. So I would say that, I mean, and then they say, well, if you sell a Van Gogh, the money will go right towards the pensions. And I maybe I'm too, cynical, but I think that they would sell the amazing works from the DIA and none of that money would go towards making the pensions whole. I just don't think that
it's going to go to the creditors, right? Because the creditors will be
the first to get paid.
Crazy, and their lawyers are aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to comment on bankruptcy.
You're a lawyer.
So is Jose. So there you go. So we'll move on.
But this brings in a good moment to introduce José Lerma.
Hey. Hello.
The best-looking man in the Chicago art world.
Huh.
At least according to Duncan's mom.
Okay.
Point.
Aww. My poor mother.
I told you there was one mom joke in there.
So one of the reasons we wanted to bring you guys together, or you guys wanted to be together, was that you've got a show coming up at MOCAD.
May 18th.
Yeah.
And you just recently rocked out a show at Raleigh.
Yeah, we worked together in the Raleigh show, and it was wonderful and easy.
It was not easy.
It wasn't easy, but it was nice. It was nice, and the space here in MOCAD is probably 3 times as big. It's really daunting. And
So is Jose very tantrumy? Because I mean, he seems like one of those artists that would be, really princessy and difficult, and like throw glasses at you and demand only green M&Ms.
I'm wonderful. Totally.
No,
Like the most
opposite.
laid back artist I've ever talked to ever. So I mean, I think that I can't imagine you're difficult to work
Well,
with.
when I was interviewing for the job at MOCAD, I showed pictures of Jose's show, and I talked about working with them, and some board members own his work, and they're like, we want you to take this job, and we totally want that show. They said it, and they said, we really want this to happen. What is it going to take? Talk to him, call him, make it happen.
Call him every day.
So
Yeah.
curatorial people in the audience, if you want a job, Jose Lerma,
Yeah.
he's your key.
Yes. I'll make it happen, apparently.
Do you know what your show's going to be about?
Sorry?
Do you know what your show's going to be about?
I don't. That's what we're supposed to meet before this.
You were going to meet before we got you on stage to talk about it?
We were going to spitball some ideas, and now it's not.
It's like, well, I've got 10 minutes before we get on stage. We'll determine what my big show's going to be about.
Some of the ideas that you know.
Maybe a little talk about planning.
Well, maybe we can backstep it a little bit and talk about one of the amazing opportunities MOCAD had to bring in the Mike Kelly, the last sort of Mike Kelly extravaganza that operates on the planet, of which I'm sure there's a slide in there.
Yeah, hopefully there is. So one just passed. Thanks, Eric. So the Mike Kelly project actually was in the works for 8 years. So there was a lot of email and contract negotiations between Marcia Myro, who's my board president, and she was also the founding director of MOCAD, and she was a good friend of Mike Kelly's, and she really wanted this to happen. And so they went back and forth. He tried to purchase his childhood home in a suburb of Detroit, and the owner wouldn't sell it. And so he said, well, I'm just going to make a replica of it. Why don't you expand the land at MOCAD and buy some more parcels, which is usually not a problem because there's lots of land in Detroit to purchase inexpensively. And so she did that, and then we had Art Angel come on board, and they paid for the entire project. It was their first U.S. commission. And then during the planning and the completion of it, really, there's my whole staff. We're standing in front of it there. And during the completion of it, he committed suicide. And it's his last project that he fully designed.
So give us the broad stroke. So it's his childhood home?
It's his childhood home. The front part of it is the mobile part. So the front part of it literally comes unattached from the ranch home, and it can be driven away with a tractor trailer. And right now that's serving as a mobile home lending library. So what we do is we drive it and we park it in front of all the libraries that are closed in Detroit, and we act as a lending library. And we have lots of places to go. Most of the libraries are closed in Detroit, or they have 1 or 2 hours. And then the books, there isn't a whole lot of resource for books there. So that's what it's doing for the first year. Thank you, Amy. and then we also do art classes. We have the Watercolor Society coming on board, and we host AA meetings in there all the time. We do that before we open, and we do that after we close. So,
Hear, hear.
So it's very much dedicated to the community, and it's for the community. And so that was something that we put together. The Rauschenberg Foundation is a big supporter of our Mike Kelly project, as well as Andy Warhol Foundation for the Arts. And then we have a garage. So it's a ranch home. It has a garage, and we do a lot of puppet shows. We do a lot of bands. So we have a lot of garage bands come and play. We're doing a big trick-or-treat festival.
I mean, come on, Detroit, Iggy and the Stooges. It's like garage, like it's like holy mecca of garage bands.
And then Kim Gordon is coming out, and she's going to play in the garage. And then the best part about the home is that there is a basement and a sub-basement. So this very ordinary-looking ranch home has a basement that goes 30 feet and a sub-basement that's 40 feet, and it's a system of catacombs and tunnels below. So it's very disconcerting when you go down. you climb a series of ladders, you go into small rooms with low ceilings and high ceilings. It's very disoriented. So Kim Gordon, Paul McCarthy, all these people are coming to Detroit and they work in the catacombs in the basement.
What is in those catacombs? It sounds both like magical, like from a children's book, and horrifying, like from a horror movie.
There's small rooms that you take a ladder, like a subway ladder, like a ladder, and then you go down and it's like you're boxed in. There's no natural light. And some of them have higher ceilings and some of them have low ceilings where you couldn't stand the whole way up. And when you go down there, you do get lost. You have to kind of keep climbing the ladders, and you have to kind of find your way out. And there's 2 hatches that pop you back up. It's really, really bizarre.
It's like one part museum, one part Lost.
Yes. He wanted to buy his childhood home, and he wanted to build tunnels and catacombs at his childhood home. But he couldn't buy the home, and so he brought the idea to MOCAD. He really brought it to Marcia Myro, whose husband is an incredible lawyer who deals with contracts and construction. And I'm not sure how it got approved or how we got our C of O. I have no idea how that works, but we have it. And to go down, I do have a very thick waiver that you must sign before you go down. And it basically says that you're not going to sue us because you could fall down a ladder. It's not like I can pick you up and get you back up. You fell 8 feet down to this catacomb.
You know waivers are bullshit, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It makes me feel better, though.
That's what they're there for. As long as you feel better, that's cool. I mean, what an intense. I mean, just the timing of it all. I mean, as a sort of last piece that he designed. I mean, that's a pretty. I mean, it would have been an important and significant and major piece of his before that. But to have that be sort of the last thing he was working on at the end of his life, I mean, that sort of changes it and makes it a memorial more than anything else. I mean, it's really pretty significant.
Yeah, I mean, the basement and sub-basement was designed for him to come to Detroit and use it. It was going to be like a Detroit studio experience. And since he's no longer there, the Destroy All Monsters group curates that space. Mm-hmm. And so that seems to be working.
So it's not just catacombs. There is art that we will encounter down in those catacombs?
Maybe. I mean, it's not
You're
open.
Not decreeping it here.
It's not open for public. It's limited, so it's not open for public. You have to be an artist, and it's designed for artist space. So it's not open, really. So if Kim wants to go down there, if Carrie wants to go down there, they go down there, and they can leave their work or they can take it. It's supposed to be totally mysterious.
It is totally mysterious. So that's working out.
Right. So the public space, and where the public is upstairs, and it's the mobile home unit. So the downstairs was designed as artist residency space.
So that should move me to Jose's big show at the MCA in Chicago.
Yeah. I have a 40-foot basement, too.
What a coincidence. It's amazing.
No, let's see, it opened, I don't know, a month and a half ago, or 2 months ago. And it's been going well. Okay.
So your show at the MCA involves kind of 3 spaces on the mezzanine level.
Yeah, you can see one here.
And here, just so humans in Radioland know, what we're looking at is a couple of install shots of Jose's kind of rug painting. So if your experience of it as a viewer would be that you come up the stairs and there is a room off to your right which has a kind of silvery, grayish, chromic drapery all around the room and several different kind of light projections and one mirrored painting sitting on two different keyboards with a couple of speakers flanking it that come out into the space. And then between the mirrors and the lights and the sort of chromic fabric, you get all sorts of different light effects, and there's moments where there's sort of like buried images in the fabric, and then and there's one sort of paper, like what looks like cast paper piece, kind of leaning up against. No, he's actually on the wall rather than leaning it on keyboards. And you emerge from there onto this crazy plush rug with lines going every different direction in kind of neon-filled space, and a giant drawing painting work which is of a number of heads with these sort of repeating lines that are defining the faces, which is also sitting on two keyboards with a couple of speakers sort of floating out that are neon pink, blaring out sound, and then further off to your left, there's a giant head staring across, but you only sort of really get the staring across as you enter the mezzanine space, and it's staring across at another giant head, which are kind of locked in a permanent gaze, like you and I are right now, Jose. And I'm making the kissing mark with my hands. Does that about describe it? Did I miss anything?
Very well put. Yeah. It's the longest.
It's
longer than the essay.
It is a hard thing to describe.
Can you? Why don't you describe every line of that painting, Duncan?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No. I mean, that's very well put. Yeah. I mean, the whole show was built around. Well, first, if you guys are familiar with these shows, they're called the BMO Harris Chicago Works, and when I got the shows, that was the name already. And the most fun, one of the most fun things for me when I'm doing a show is naming my show. I think that's pretty much the only phone I have. So that's taken away. So then that became the subject matter for the show. So what you're seeing here are the two founders of BMO, the Bank of Montreal and Harris Bank, painted on the rugs so people can walk on their faces.
So you hate all Canadians, is what you're saying?
Actually, I couldn't find anything bad on Bank of Montreal. They have a pretty clean image. Way to go.
Go Canada.
Yeah. The regulation works. No, it was more, I kept the whole tone of the show very neutral. So it wouldn't feel like I wasn't celebrating anything or attacking anything. Well, the bank thing a little bit, but only as more of a joke than anything. But it's mostly based around the plaques in the space. So when I got there, there's about 5 or 6 plaques in a very small space. And that determined sort of the map before the territory. That sort of selected all the works for me, in a way. And so that was easy. All you had to do is find information of these people online, or the donors, and whatever you could find, and make some work about them, make some portraits.
Jose, one of your portraits is here.
Oh, wonderful. How are you? We're supposed to meet.
I'm wonderful, thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah. So I saw a very nice picture of you with the bust.
With the bus?
Yeah. Kind of next to it. And, yeah, someone showed me an image, and I was relieved that you liked it, and you were happy. Yes. Thank you.
Did she like it, or is she here to like serve you with papers?
I'm sorry? Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So one of the things that I was really interested in about that show and that space was that it comes to us kind of very conceptually loaded around bankers, around a question of donorship and a question of museums, and yet when I was in those spaces, they felt much more about the kind of formal qualities of the work, much more about our visceral experience of like this kind of like weirdly thick painting on mirrors, or the kind of experience of seeing your shadow interacting with the other shadows in the space, or an image emerging out of cloth where there wasn't one, or the feeling of being on that kind of crazy plush carpet. I'm just going to list all of the things that I just described a minute ago. Or the parachute.
It's that incredible. Please.
It's, but the work all feels incredibly visceral, and I feel like all of that kind of conceptual load sort of washes away in a kind of sort of celebrates like
What are you trying to say?
Well, no, I mean, he's right in that I wanted to be, I mean, spectacle is kind of an ugly word, but I wanted that to be the primary thing in this show. That it did feel, even though the materials are cheap and as an experience it's separately, they don't mean much, but I wanted the whole of it to feel spectacular with very little. And insofar as that idea of the curtain being optical, it's because the donor that had the plaque in that room was an ophthalmologist. So, and he designed, he was one of the first people to use laser surgery. And so there's images of early laser surgeries. I'm sorry, early surgeries in the 11th century, not laser.
Oh, wow, that's
mostly a stick that went into your eye. And there's also, allusions to cataracts using various films and paints and varnishes, which are also allusions to vernissage and openings and structures of museology and such things.
So, I mean, you've taken what is I mean, you've been doing a lot of two-dimensional work in recent years, and this is very sculptural and installation, and you've sort of taken a lot of the conventions of it, an exhibition of two-dimensional work, and turned it on its head, or at least turned it on the floor, where you have people walking on the work, or you have things that have been sort of turned into three-dimensional spaces, or you've skinned, you've taken the paint off and made it into an object. So, I mean. Was that, in terms of examining the space, I mean, are you more interested in, when you were thinking about the show and what you were going to do, was it originally conceived as more of a two-dimensional show, and then through your interaction with the space and the fact that there were certain factors that you couldn't change and that you wanted to modify, is that what turned it into something more installation-based? Or?
Yeah, I mean, you always start with some ideas and end up completely different, and this one it had a lot to do with the staircase as you come off the third floor. You stop for a moment and you can actually see, it becomes a platform to see the heads and the drawing on the carpet. And so that's the thing that kind of set it off formally. The rest of it was just literally finding information, whatever I could, on some of these donors. And if I couldn't find information, then a photograph would be nice, but mostly neutral information. Things like from the CV, nothing, only one image, one of the relating to the bank has if anything negative, and it was just something that happened that was factual in the 80s, where one painting that was commissioned by the bank was painted over, but even that seems more interesting as an art issue than a financial issue or anything like that.
Yeah, so the story there is the bank commissioned a portrait shortly after the merger of the two banks, and then they were like, "Oh, this is too flashy next to all of the other portraits of bankers, because you would not imagine one to be more flattering, right?" And then they went back to the artist and said, "Hey, would you make this less enjoyable?" And and she rightly said no. And then they commissioned another artist to hackishly scrape it down and kind of clean it up in a bank sense.
Yeah, and sadly, the artist that did the original painting, Myrtle was her name. She died this year. So, but yes, it got repainted, and it got repainted in the most hilarious way, because they made him look like he was 21 and a bank president.
Definitely a guy you would trust with your money.
You would trust with your money. He's not going to drink it.
I keep seeing the image of that car, and I'm interested in cars.
Yes.
What's the car?
The car is an early piece I did. It's just when my parents got divorced when I was a kid, and the classic story where they had a station wagon. My dad bought a Corvette. So I just took a station wagon and chopped it up, and with paper mache and paint made a Corvette from memory. And then it was a piece for a show. That just
Where is it today?
It was burnt to the ground by some people. We left it after the show. We left that park in Old San Juan, and people started throwing trash first, then needles, and then it was on the news as a nuisance. And someone showed it to me. This is within a week, just to show you how Puerto Rico can be. I'm from there, I can say that. In 1 week, that thing looked like the biggest shithole you've ever seen. And so it was on the news, and then the next day, someone set it on fire. So finally, the city took it away. Glorious.
So
And
that's quality criticism right there.
I think that's the best
It's really,
piece I've ever
very,
done for that reason.
Like, defined, you know.
Maybe you can take abandoned cars in Detroit and paper mache them and see what happens.
I'd like that, yeah.
This is the genius at work, people. You are watching them plan this show right now.
You can see the electricity now.
So so the next show coming up for José Lerma is José Lerma Burns Detroit Down.
It opens May 18th.
After covering it with paper mache.
Yes. And that's way better than the 8 really crappy ideas that I have in store.
I'm glad we're here to workshop this.
Yeah.
Okay, so one of the questions that I came out of the MCA show with was about the keyboards and about resting the work on the keyboards and the kind of like drone that sets the piece to. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that's really weird about the keyboard sound coming out of the speakers is it feels like it pulses a bit.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like a stable noise. It feels like it's like and it sets your whole experience to a weird soundtrack, but also works as a really unusual way to set those paintings.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pulsating noise. And, I could have had sort of a flat wave that wouldn't have done this thing. But by tweaking it around a little bit, you get a situation where you never quite hear the same sound anywhere because they're all going on different sort of loops. And by the way, the keyboards are playing everything live. So these things are on, 12 hours a day. And then the weight of the paintings are pressing on the keys, and then they make the noise. So it's all happening live. And you can lift the painting, and it stops.
So I could go in
No,
and
you
try
don't
to...
lift the painting.
Why?
As a visitor, you wouldn't lift the painting.
Well, there's always some jackass that
Yeah.
wants to play music in there.
Yeah.
It's like, a chopstick or something.
Wow.
You would play Van Halen.
I would play Van Halen
Yeah.
Jump for anyone.
These are the sorts of problems that museum security departments just can't anticipate.
No, but it came from, I did a show at a gallery here, 7-3 Split, many, many years ago. And back then I had the practice of just arriving there with no art, spending a week, and just finding whatever was around the gallery to make art. So there was a lipstick somewhere, you draw with that, there's some mud, you make a painting with that. There happened to be a keyboard and that a friend of mine had nearby. So because of that Spinal Tap thing about the saddest chord in the world, I taped three keys to make a D minor chord. So that's where the keyboard thing came back. So now I just steal from my old shit. Good artists, do they tell me?
Well, you're way ahead of a lot of other artists who just steal from the grad students. So you're doing a good job. You go the extra distance. Your amps go up to 11, Jose.
Thank you.
Duncan.
I know, I got the Spinal Tap reference. I was with you. Everybody was with you.
Let's make it sure.
Yeah.
We all know.
That's good.
So let's go back to MOCAD for a minute. Now I feel like I'm tennising.
Yeah.
Clearly I was prepared to do 2 entirely separate interviews, and this slamming together is a confluence I was not ready for.
It's going well, though.
It's going well.
Well, the jury's still out on that.
Yeah.
The jury is weighed in. So let's talk about what's up at MOCAD right now. What's MOCAD doing aside from being the place for Mike Kelly's last piece.
Well, last night we just had our big gala benefit, and it ended at 4 a.m. It was really tiring. Jose donated a work, and it was very generous of him. Thank you, Amy. It was a really, really nice portrait of Mr. Cadillac, who helped found Detroit. So Jose always does research and produces these incredible portraits, and it's really generous. So up right now, we work with a curator, Jens Hoffman, who is our guest curator, but he's also the deputy director of exhibitions at the Jewish Museum. And he curated a show called Past is Present, and he invited 15 international artists to pick a point in Detroit's history, and then we paired those international artists with a Detroit sign painter or mural painter to execute their point of history or vision or photo montage or verbal instructions. And so we have these large-scale 15 feet by 9 feet murals up in the museum right now. And so they picked the bankruptcy, they picked urban gardening as one. They picked DRUM, which is the African American Auto Workers Association. They picked the selling of DIA works. They picked an FBI letter from the archive about a Martin Luther King visit to a Girls Point High School. So they range in lots of different ways. Detroit has, I guess, a dark, troubled history, and they did zero in on that. I would say that Martha Rossler is probably the most political artist that we have up right now, and hers is an infographic about labor unions and how labor unions were kind of busted up and reconformed to serve different purposes and what the different outcomes were. We had one artist cover Black Bottom, and Black Bottom is the space where the Mies van der Rohe, where Lafayette Park is, and Lafayette Park was designed by Mies van der Rohe. Detroit has the highest saturation of Mies van der Rohe buildings on the planet, and so, yes, yeah.
Suck it, Chicago.
And you can buy one. They are not that expensive, cheap. You could probably buy two. Association dues are about $6.73 a month, but they take out your garbage, so, and it includes Wi-Fi and cable. So
It almost sounds like you live in one.
I am trying. I'm stalking. I flyered the whole place before I came here. If my phone rings, I have to get it because people are starting to move out. It's an older community, so it was designed as low-income housing. It was called Black Bottom. It was raised to create newer, better low-income housing. It never really fully swung back to low-income housing, but they're beautiful buildings, and it's a great little oasis in Detroit. And so that kind of historical struggle, it's kind of what happened with Cabrini Green here. I think that's a good analogy. That was a subject matter. A lot of oil and cars. That's a big topic that artists covered.
Oil and cars?
Oil and cars.
Or oil and cars?
Oil and cars.
Yeah, because it's Detroit.
It's Detroit.
Motor City.
Motor City. Everyone drives American cars. Very much so. And
sadly, not me.
It's kind of the other point of interest is that during the research to get ready for the show is I took Pedro Reyes. He's a great artist. We took him out to the GM Technical Center, and it was built. It's the largest corporate park in the United States, and it was built by Eero Saarinen, and it's beautiful. They have a Calder fountain. They have like the birdcage staircases. It's absolutely gorgeous, and it's like a time warp. So you go back in time, and all the furniture is by Eames, and it's gorgeous. And then you go inside these design studios where they're designing American cars out of clay, and you're like, oh, this is where it all goes wrong. They have all these like horrible cars being designed in clay, and I'm just like, get a young, hip designer in here and can't they help you design a better looking car?
So it's not the clay.
There's your show
Not
right there.
necessarily.
That's what I'm doing.
Design-
Going back to the box.
You've already done it once with the Corvette, so
Yeah.
design the next great American car.
Yeah, like that Simpsons car, like
Exactly.
the place
The
like
Homer.
Karacha, yeah.
This is going great.
So, so now I'm going to bounce back to Jose in an endless tennis match. So, I was unprepared for those sculptures, and because I think about you normally as a painter and drawer, and as having a kind of personal and idiosyncratic relationship with painting and drawing, not as a sculptor. And strangely, those paintings or those sculptures feel incredibly painterly. They feel like that chunky kind of way that you love to sort of push things around. And I wanted to ask about how you came to portraiture in terms of using giant sheets of colored paper.
Well, I have a friend, Hector Madera. We collaborate on these pieces, and he was the one who introduced me to this paper, the paper itself. And he was making small abstract pieces with it. And I could have stolen the idea, but I was like, let's just collaborate on something. And instead I said, well, we can make them larger. And I kept thinking of, well, I can make them look sort of like the paint portraits that I was making. So no real likeness, but mostly something that looks like the person, loosely, and crushing the paper. And that had its own power. It's powerful, but it's also paper. There's something very beautiful about it. And it's really matte, so it looks like Play-Doh. It looks like a gigantic sort of child sculpture. The other thing is like they're destroyed after every show. And they go up real fast. So it's a very easy way of making a show. And it was basically that. The impetus was, can I make a large bust out of these things? Essentially do the painting three-dimensionally.
So, in terms of the works in this exhibition, are they distinct? Is it a series of distinct works? Is it one piece? I mean, like the paper pieces aren't objects to be maintained. I mean, what aspects of the show are installation? And do the paintings resting on the keyboards, is it all one packaged thing, or is it just a display method?
It's both. Some of the paintings are autonomous, but within this situation, you have to make it work. I mean, normally, I've extended the area of the carpet to include the other work. So by sheer physical contact, they become one, and I have to deal with that. So I've tried to integrate them, but normally something like this would be a separate work, except they're all tied in by the plaques. That's really the tying. The sort of the way that the show comes together conceptually.
So in terms of showing this, because I mean, like
this show could not work in another place. Basically, it wouldn't make any sense.
So the whole thing is site specific.
It's not. What is it that? It's a portraits. Oh, someone told me. Cyrus. Hey, there she is. Thank you. That was her.
Site responsive portraiture.
She came up with that
for the record,
and I thought it was perfect. But it's true. It's It responds to that specific place.
So you show these again somewhere else as separate pieces, or?
These things, these were shown in Berlin originally, and then recently they were taken to a museum in Spain, and they were shown there in a weird kind of. It didn't look the same.
The carpet pieces were shown?
The carpet pieces were shown in Spain in a show about Latin American painting, recent Latin American painting. And then this is the show that happened at Raleigh that Elysia put together. And it's a massive space, and I think we did it all in 6 days. So most of the work, I've had this practice that goes back like maybe 4 or 5 years where didn't really have a studio full time, so I would just arrive at the gallery or move into the gallery for like a month during the summer and just make all the work there. And so it always responds to whatever's there and whatever, the stores that are around the place. So I would buy anything around the area, so you get a very different look every time.
We got all the carpet donated in Raleigh, and so Jose had to work with the colors that we had donated, and I was always really impressed that he made it work because I was looking at what we had to work with, and I was like,
Yeah.
like, this is not looking good.
It looked like a burnt pizza.
But he made it look beautiful. He actually, because he didn't have all the colors that he wanted, he just flipped the carpet over and used the underside, so he had more of a taupe brown color, more of a neutral color.
Yeah, and also the store that gave us the carpets put my name on their website.
Yeah.
I was really proud of that.
Nice.
And they came to the opening. And
They came to the opening.
they were
That was
really
pretty cool.
Excited.
You have like an endorsement deal with him. You
Pretty
like, do a
much,
commercial.
yeah.
It's like you and the Empire Carpet guy. Like,
I think
together.
me, yeah. Big billboard.
I think you would look great. I think we are also at that point for audience questions. I know that we've been fairly participatory. Go.
What kind of rules do you come up with to guide the structure of each piece, of group of pieces?
Of each piece or of each show?
Each piece or each group? Yeah, it feels like you have rules within, because within each one. And I was just wondering if you could talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, you start with some very loose ideas, and then you try to connect it to the site. So it becomes some of it has the logic of a monument, for instance. You know, but most of the time it all has its own internal rules. I mean, nothing is fixed. Every show is completely different. For instance, in Spain, I did one that had to talk about the fact that I was born in Spain, lived in Puerto Rico, and moved to the U.S. So I try to base it around stories that link the three countries. So I find a lot of these B-side sort of characters that are not very famous, and I just do research on them and try to make goofy paintings of these people. Mostly because I think it's great to, like, you Google these people and then my painting comes up because there's nothing on these people. So, and also we live in an era you can do that. You can make work about very obscure people or not, and you can access it immediately. So that's one way. I mean, other times it's more formal. This one was very loose. The one in Raleigh was very loose, and the one here in Chicago, it's, like I said, follows the logic of the space and of the plaques. So it's always different. There's an image here of my MFA show. I just applied a paint stripper to the wall of the gallery because, well, you remember that gallery? It had been painted.
For the record, Richard and Jose went to grad school at the same place, and also were both JD MFAs. We're both lawyer artists.
You're looking at the sum total of the people to ever do that.
On this stage here tonight.
Yeah. He did the right thing and the smart thing.
Yeah, it's
finished.
We could argue about that one later.
But the school had this. The walls were so bad. They had been painted over and over 15 years, and it looked like the moon. So basically, I applied paint stripper, and just it follows that thing where, like, often I just use whatever's there and try to guide the show around whatever I can find around. If there's nothing there, that gallery happened to have a lot of information hidden in the walls. So I just scraped the walls, and there was a show. The show was the last 15 years of paintings everyone else did. So.
Did you tell Angel Otero that story?
No, I don't know, maybe. Through osmosis.
Audience.
Curator for the MCA is here that did your show. Kristen?
Yay.
Should we make you step and take a bow?
Yay, Kristen. She did a great job.
I missed part of when you were describing the MCA show. I was trying to race over here from somewhere else.
He said it was the best experience
The best
he's ever had
experience.
as a professional his entire
Yes,
career.
and how awesome you were.
Wow.
That's basically it.
So you were talking a little bit, maybe you could talk a little bit more about how it kind of came together in the MCA show. It seemed like you considered the site in a way in which you hadn't, but was always kind of alluded to in previous projects, in prior projects. I wrote about it a little bit with your MFA show. And that kind of created our argument for sort of referencing, because it does become kind of political to reference the patrons of each space.
Right.
Everyone was very much on board with that, but it was because it's an argument that's rooted within your practice.
Right.
You source information either historically or from a particular site. So I don't know if you talked about that a little bit. You hit it a bit with the site-responsive portraiture.
Yeah. I mean, it was a way of keeping with neutrality, the kind of tone I like in works. The problem of patronage is complicated, and it was something that I thought it was best addressed just through maybe framing it, not necessarily attacking it one way or another one. I mean, I think it was a very I mean, it was not mild, but just very matter of fact. It's like, there's these plaques here, let's make work about them.
That was the majority of our conversations, was figuring out, it was the idea in the space, and then figuring out kind of what our position would be there. And we said throughout the project that it was neither celebratory nor critical, but was an attempt to kind of balance between those two.
Yeah, exactly.
And having it matter of fact about kind of drawing attention to just kind of sort of the politics of display, but in a way that was informed by your painting practice, painting looking at sight.
Yeah, I mean,
Sort of different ways.
it found the right tone, I thought, and I was very happy with it. Thank you. That was really awesome.
Questions? Then we're done. Drop the mic, step the fuck back.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you
you,
for
guys.
joining us.